the first week back at uni after the Christmas break.
The Prime Minister is being urged to explain why as many as 100 people were invited to a party in the Downing Street garden when such parties were banned.
Home to 60,000 students, this is a city well aware of the controversy surrounding lockdown parties. This footage allegedly shows a party of 200 being broken up by Nottinghamshire police at this halls of residence. Students here were often criticised for their behaviour in the pandemic, with hundreds of garden parties held in the local park.
Did you guys go to any parties in lockdown?
Maybe hosted a few, but who knows.
Yeah. I was not a part of the hosting, but I definitely went to a few parties.
Law student Samuel and his friend Mikhail admit they did make the most of the lovely weather and bring their own booze. Several of their friends were fined by the police under legislation issued by a government now accused of holding its own parties.
They can't really blame the students if our leaders can't follow the rules themselves.
So how do you feel when you hear that at a time when you guys were being threatened with fines, the Prime Minister was having his own party, allegedly?
In response to the people who were fined, I feel like it's only right if they are fully reimbursed.
Especially if our Prime Minister isn't taking it serious himself.
And it's that perceived unfairness that we found was raised again and again here.
Hundreds of students were issued with warnings by the two universities here for breaching lockdown rules. Some were suspended from their courses, others had to leave their halls of residence. Nearly £100,000 was handed out in fines. In light of the Downing Street allegations, some students are now saying that these fines should be refunded.
Of course, the issue of trust isn't just about parties. Across the country, families were going through the heartache of sticking to the rules as their loved ones lay dying. Lindsay Jackson's mother, Sylvia, was in a care home when she contracted COVID and died.
And I wasn't with her. Couldn't hold her hand. Yeah, she was on her own.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
We arranged her funeral. I couldn't go to the funeral home to see her. That wasn't allowed. So that was what was happening to me while they were having their well-earned drinks in the garden of number 10.
If that party went ahead and if the Prime Minister was there with his wife, what do you think should happen?
Well, the police should be involved. I mean, Boris Johnson apparently believes he's above the law. Well, he's not. He is not. And he should not be.
The legality of what happened in Downing Street hasn't been determined. But for many here, whatever the investigation finds, the loss of faith in those who govern us will be far harder to fix.
Well, I'm joined now by Lobby Akinola of the COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice group. His father, Femi, who worked as a support worker for MENCAP, died of COVID in April 2020 at the age of 60. Lobby Akinola, you tragically weren't able to see your father before he passed away because of the rules in place at the time. How painful was that?
It's hard to articulate the pain that I felt not being able to see my dad. I had planned to go home for my birthday and celebrate it with my family, but unfortunately we went into lockdown, and that meant that I never saw my dad alive again. That's something that lives with me and I carry every day. I didn't get to say goodbye, and that pain doesn't diminish, it doesn't lessen. So hearing the news of there being parties taking place in number 10, whilst, you know, people like me and other people like me were making monumental sacrifices, is really difficult to hear.
So what would you say to the Prime Minister about those parties as he reflects on what's emerged in the last few days?
I think I would ask the Prime Minister just to reflect on basic humanity. You know, so many people in this country were doing their utmost, making big sacrifices, unable to see loved ones, not even those people who are bereaved, but people who had to live by themselves, were isolated. The effect of these lockdowns on the UK population is really hard to overestimate, but it's a sacrifice we all made. in order to protect each other. So I'd ask the Prime Minister, why does he think it's fair? And like, how does he relate to the people he's elected to serve and protect if he's having parties while the rest of us are being locked inside?
Do you want him to quit?
I think personally, if the Prime Minister is found to have been at that party, I don't see how he can remain in that position of being Prime Minister, because he set these rules himself. He set the rules himself, and they were supposed to protect people. The only message that I can get from that is that he doesn't think it's important to protect us. And that's not someone you want leading you through a crisis. I think, in fact, if he, to the extent that if he wasn't at these parties, but he knew they were happening, why did he allow it to happen? And it really does beg the question about, if these parties are taking place in his own garden and he's not aware of them, is he able to lead us through the crisis we're going through at this scale? So I think really the Prime Minister should be considering his position, because to say he's let us down is an understatement.
And tell us about your dad, because he was a support worker for MenCap, so doing really crucial work in the pandemic. Tell us about the sacrifices that he made.
My dad was a very generous and kind man. He was the kind of person who would visit some of his clients on his days off just to make sure that they were okay. And he kept on working throughout that first lockdown. It's something that, even though it's painful to lose him, I say with pride, because he was definitely a man who would put himself, he put others before himself, and he continued working to make sure that the people who depended on him were okay. Even when he got sick, he isolated in the living room and wasn't seeing the family, because he wanted to make sure everyone in the family would be okay. He's someone I considered very much a role model and a leader for our family, and it's disappointing and it hurts a lot to know that people like him who are making the sacrifices are the ones who've had to pay the price.
Lobi Akinola, he sounds like an incredible man, your father, Femi. Thank you very much for remembering him and his sacrifice and for joining us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.